Welcome, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining today's session, Beyond Work-Life Balance, Identifying and Prioritizing Our True Values. Today, we're so delighted to be joined by Dr. Meag-gan O'Reilly, a cognitive behavioral therapist in private practice and at Stanford University, who will be facilitating today's workshop. Thank you so much, Dr. O'Reilly, and welcome. We're really looking forward to today's session. As any thoughts or questions emerge throughout the workshop, please feel free to drop them into the chat. Thank you so much again, one and all, and thank you, Dr. O'Reilly.
Awesome. Thank you for that warm introduction, Christy. I'm honored and excited to be with you all at this year's Horizon by Hopkins to really share a paradigm shifting perspective on how we can navigate the many demands of a fulfilling life, as well as our academic and career pursuits. I like to say there is no having it all, but there is having your all. Watch that. See what I did there? So this means leading a life that is self-defined in terms of success, relationships, impact, and experiences and growth. So with our time today, I want us to co-journey into some new territory where we will entertain another way of navigating life. Some ideas will be new and perhaps even hard to entertain because we are going to be going against the grain and maybe swimming upstream a little bit. But please, I just want you to know that this is just the introduction, just an appetizer and a amuse-bouche, if you will. And I hope this sparks further conversations within yourself and among you and your loved ones. And I am always sharing on these types of themes on my social media. So go ahead and follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn. So let's embark together. Our first stop is defining a few terms that we will depart from, but I always believe we must locate where we are before we move in the right direction to where we're going, okay? So the first term I want us to look at is work-life balance, right? The reason we're here. This has been a buzzword for quite a while. And when something becomes a buzzword, it loses its original definition, purpose, and power and kind of gets watered down a little bit. So let me define work-life balance and then talk about why it's problematic before I give us the alternative. So work-life balance is the state of equilibrium where a person equally prioritizes the demands of one's career and the demands of one's personal life. That's a good working definition that I got from Forbes. Now, as Christy told you in my intro, I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist. I also work from a liberation psychology perspective, and I look very intently at words because the words we use sets the frames that we conceive in our cognition, right? And if any of you are familiar with Kimberly Crenshaw's work around intersectionality, a mental frame matters very much because it dictates how we orient to concepts, thus how we behave in response to different situations. So there's a few things about this definition that are very suspect. Let's just look at a few elements here together. It said equally prioritize the demands of one's career and the demands of one's personal life. How do you equally prioritize something? The definition of prioritize means that something is, edging out, is triaged ahead of something else. So equally prioritize sounds a little bit of a conundrum there. It also uses the word demands. Equally prioritizes the demands of one's career and the demands of one's personal life. Now, as professional students, as young adults, you know that there's some life admin tasks, bills, chores that are demands, as well as the demands of your academic rigor. Now, demands is just one side of life. What about desires, right? That's missing from this definition. And we're all very steeped in capitalism, and capitalism tells us that we need to be productive at any given moment. And how we define productivity is usually advancing towards some aim that's making somebody money, and it's not always us, right? So what's missing here is the desires, the leisure, the things that don't show up on our resume, the off-book parts of our life, right? And then my last critique of this definition is the word equilibrium. Okay, it is extremely difficult to maintain equilibrium between anything, right? And so what we get is a seesaw effect between all work and no play, or all play and no work, usually the former, all work and no play. And I want to pause here to say that as a psychologist, I witness this torturous seesaw firsthand every day in the graduate students that I counsel at therapy here at Stanford. It looks like long gauntlets of work, which are getting increasingly longer, and then very merciful small breaks, like maybe even winter break coming up. And I'm also aware that not all students can afford such breaks, right? Or even travel. And then our international students have additional hurdles for breaks and travels, right? So I see the seesaw even in a given day and across a week, where students may procrastinate with escapist self-care behaviors. And I have a whole nother workshop on how you can determine between self-care and escapism. So you may procrastinate all the way up to the last minute and then get everything done in a very, again, torturous work grind. And cram everything in before the deadline. And I want you to know there's actually 7 different types of procrastination. I teach the science of motivation and procrastination here at Stanford's wellness department, and that class is always full every quarter. But the piece I want you to know is that we now know that procrastination is not a time management issue. I hope I can really compassionately speak into a few of your lives here, because even if you use all the tips and tools, we know that procrastination is an emotional regulation issue. What I mean by that is whatever you're avoiding is usually conjuring up some negative emotion, some negative mood state, be it imposter feelings, be it failure, be it inadequacy. That's why you're not engaging with the task. So if that was this workshop, I would talk to you about how to begin to attend to those emotions so you can procrastinate less. But what we're holding right now together is the truth that the seesaw effect between working really hard and then exhaustively breaking really isn't where we want to put our energies. And that's what work-life balance is hinting that we can do, but it's actually a false sell. No one really is able to do that quite well. And your sanity is held in the balance at that fulcrum point. Okay. Okay. So the concept of work-life balance has even evolved over time. I'm going to drop in the chat a Forbes article that you can read in your leisure time, in your own time. And it just highlights a couple things that I hope you see in there. And the big one that I want to leave you with is how in this conversation, the onus of managing work-life balance is usually placed on the individual, even though we are a part of larger systems, academic systems, institutions, work cultures. And so as a DEI consultant, I center the system a lot, usually oppressive systems. And I just want to say that some of the onus on work-life balance and work-life integration, which we're about to talk about, is on the institution. So it's not just all on you, okay? A quick aside here, one of my friends, she's a doctor now, she taught me something very valuable that I want to pass on to you. And she said, I don't know if I had the gall to do this, but I hope we do. She said when she was interviewing for residencies, so when you're looking at postdocs, jobs, or really any position, that you get to ask the organization things like, how do you support employee self-care here? Or what is work-life integration like here, right? You're also interviewing them, because if it is going to be the next place you study or work, it's a big life decision, and you get to mine out the data that's really going to dictate what your well-being is going to be like. So do take those questions with you. How do you as an organization prioritize or support employee self-care, and what does work-life integration look like? I even saw a meme recently on LinkedIn that said, when they're asking for your references, you could ask to talk to 5 happy employees. I don't know how much leeway or power we have to do that, but it was a nice thought. All right, let's press on. Our next term is work-life integration. So this is moving from the seesaw to more of a interwoven approach, more like this. So the definition is work-life integration is a move toward blending both personal and professional responsibilities and desires, so desires made it in a way that removes the artificial notion that work and the rest of your life is separate. Okay. This is increasingly true due to the ongoing pandemic, where the lines have truly blurred with remote classes. Some of you might be on campus now. I know Stanford came back to in-person classes, but for a while there, and in hybrid situations, we were literally in our bedrooms, sometimes in our bed or in our couch, with blouses on the tops and PJs on the bottom. So this blend between work and life is physically, emotionally, and psychologically apparent. So with work-life balance, the blend can start to look like rejecting, resisting, and no longer segmenting all the other parts of who you are and your life to before or after your 9 to 5 or your school schedule, right? So it looks like building a routine, which there's tips and tools on how to build a successful routine. The Power of Habit is a really great book. I offer it often for bibliotherapy. But to build a routine that weaves in the two together. So for example, you have a lab meeting and then you go to the gym, or you're preparing for a TA lecture or grading after you eat lunch, right? I can't express how much that fueling your body, eating regularly, is overlooked, at least by the grad students I serve. So something to think about, your foundational 4: resting your body, fueling your body, moving your body, whatever movement practice you have, doesn't have to be hardcore exercise, and then connecting your body to other somebodies, which has been hard in the pandemic. Sleep, appetite, movement, and connection. Those are your foundational 4 to return to at all times and make sure are robust. And that's the basement, right? So small ways to prioritize your wellness before the work, because without you, no work is getting done, okay? So let's pause here. People are flowing in. This is being recorded, so you can go back to the beginning and catch it all. But I want to pause here and kind of feel the room a little bit. I want to see, before we press on to the most fun and important part of identifying values, I want to know what roadblocks might be in our midst or in the way. I'm going to do this by a little bit of engagement. Let's see if anyone is familiar with Mentimeter. It's a way that I can anonymously pull things. Okay. So this is our link. Go ahead and click that while I prepare to share my screen. It's going to take us to a few questions we're going to answer together. Okay. Now, this is coming from my experience as a psychologist here with my own grad students. So many times I hear students tell me, you know, Megan, I may know what I want to do, or there's this other way I could be moving in my department, but if I do, I'll feel like a bad graduate student, right? If I leave the lab at 5 to have dinner, but everyone's there till midnight, well, how does that look on me, right? So I just want to ask this room, when you prioritize your needs, do you feel like a bad student, right? Let's take a few more moments to see. 22 people have responded. There's 38 of us in the room. I'm seeing that, yeah, often is in the lead. I want to highlight that no one said never. So there's something in our phenomenological experience as students that there is some pressure, okay? 5 people have said yes, definitely. Okay. I'll let this go for a few more moments. And do feel free to sound off in the chat with anecdotes, responses, snaps, if this is resonating with you or for you. Okay. often is still in the lead. Mhm. Thank you, Anna. I love Mentimeter too. I got some more for you coming up. Let's press on to our next question. We're holding steady at about 27 out of our 38 have voted here. So it's often that we feel this way. Let's look now to see where the pressure might be coming from. So we're holding that we often feel like there's a good and bad binary of graduate student behavior, right? I want to hear from us, where might this pressure be coming from? Is it coming from our department having unrealistic standards? Is it coming from family, peers? All right. Let's watch this. In the lead right now is from the self. I've internalized maybe grind culture a long time ago, because as a professional student, you've made it through high school, undergrad, master's program, any constellation of a lot of schooling that has probably taught us to over prioritize work and leave the self behind. In second place, we're having some rivalries, but my peers was in second place. It just got bumped down to third from the department, okay? So centering the system here for a moment, yes, departments definitely have a role and could do a lot to change how students experience their work-life integration. And we'll talk just a touch more about that. Because let's also be honest of another element present here, power, right? I remember as a graduate student, I felt like my advisors, your PIs, had disproportionate power over my future, right? Letters of recommendation, networking, just their opinion of me, how they treat me on the day-to-day. So I'm not surprised to see that the self and the department are 1 and 2. Let's look at a few more things. Okay, we're about to transition into talking about identifying our values and being more in alignment with those values each day. So one way to start excavating and figuring that out is to understand, what have you given up, or what are you currently giving up? So what are the things you're sacrificing? Oh, first up, mental health. Let's just pause meaningfully here to see what people drop in the chat. Family, physical health, health in general, happiness. Oof, that one hits my mother's heart. Time with my son. Self-discovery, creativity. Creative hobbies, family. Thank you all. Yeah, this is I'm getting a little soft in my old age. This is precisely why I wanted to lead this discussion, because these are the things that matter to us, that build a fulfilling life, that I honestly, boldly will say we can't afford to sacrifice. I'm seeing a lot more physical health, exercise, leisure, sharing quality time with friends and family, personal relationship with my husband, friends, mental health. Okay, eating well. Oh Lord, y'all are taking me back to grad school, right? I remember not eating well. Okay, thank you for these vulnerable shares. We're really getting real with each other here. Okay, so some of you did say my values in this next piece. And although we're going to learn how to identify our values together here in a moment, I just wanted to throw it out there for some open space. What is one of your values? Do you know? If so, drop it in a word. We're going to put a word cloud up here. Awesome. Justice, equity, compassion. This is Horizons, yes, by Hopkins. Yes, equity, compassion, family, kindness, yeah. Love, integrity, service. I see balance, learning, faith, Honesty, love to see that one. And as you may already know, word clouds, the more of a single word we get endorsed, the bigger the size of the word. So family and kindness are taking center stage. Empathy, caring, humor, yes, respect, self-compassion. That's actually the harder side of compassion. We dole it out freely to others, but it's hard to give to ourselves. Philanthropy, stewardship. Y'all are coming through. Authenticity. Love it. I'm going to make sure Christy and some of the other organizers gets these slides so we can reflect on them on a later time. But allow me to stop sharing my screen and press on. We have some more goodies to cover. Okay. So let me see here. Awesome. Again, thank you for all the very powerful shares. It's very important for us to use our voice, even if it's anonymously, but also co-witness each other, right? We all got to resonate as a group here. So the last question is what we're going to hold together now. We talked about sacrifice and trying to identify, put words to some of those values. Now, I want you to know that sacrifice can lead to resentment, which can be a recipe for regret and unfulfillment. And I don't want that for any of you. I actually started my career in gerontology, which is the psychology of older adults. And I've been slowly marching my way up the youth ladder. And now I work with young adults and have a few children's books in me. And why I've been making that shift is it's actually very saddening for me to be working with someone who's 60, 75, and they're just now getting some of the gems that I want you all to have now. So the sooner we learn some of this alignment, the better. So as a Black woman, as a child of immigrant parents, I know full well that there's a time and a place for sacrifice, right? Others have sacrificed for us to be where we are. As a mother, I make sacrifices. So I think sacrifice on a whole is not something we can rule out, but I want us to look at our task a little differently. Our task becomes identifying what I call our non-negotiables. These are the things that we will not sacrifice. These are the things that must be present in our life to some measure and amount, or else we're amputating a part of ourselves or a part of our well-being that we ought not afford to amputate. So we can identify what these things are by way of our values. Our values are broad principles that motivate our actions and serve as guidance for our life, right? Everyone has values, even if you're not sure what your are yet. It's just that everyone has a different set of values. And right after how do I identify my values, the second question I get is, what are the best values to have? I work with a lot of high achievers, and the truth is there are no better or worse values. Again, it's about what is fitting for you and your nature and your needs. So let's look at that first question. How do I know what my values are? Well, my answer to you is that you have to excavate them. Sometimes they're face valid. Many of you started to that word cloud with some of your values, but I like to say psychology is often archaeology, right? We have to look at our influences, our history, and dig down to see what's underneath very large and omnipressive, often oppressive forces, right? I mentioned capitalism, white supremacy, heteronormativity, patriarchy. I could continue, right? So this is lifespan work. Don't expect yourself to walk out of here with a robust tabulation of all your clearly defined values, but I do want you to walk out of here with a methodology. Sometimes a method is better than an answer because our values change over time. As you evolve and mature, so do your values. I know I value different things now than I did in my early 20s. So here are a few things that will help you identify your values, do that excavation work. Okay. My favorite is this worksheet I'm dropping in the chat right now. This is something you can do over winter break, in your own time, whenever you have a few moments of reflection. This handout, I do it with clients all the time, walks us through this excavation process. It asks you what your mom's value is, what your dad's value is. I like to say primary caregivers, whoever raised you, what are their values? It asks you who's someone you admire. I usually pick Maya Angelou or Michelle Obama. Who's someone you admire, living or dead? What are their values? How do you know what their values are through their behavior, the life they lived? Then it asks you to look at society's values, right? You can check out my TED Talk on this, but society often values these conditions of worth, right? Ego, wealth, status, beauty, all these fleeting things, right? But only after you identify those does it prompt you then to start to identify your own, because we're usually some amalgamation or internalization of those other forces, right? And I also want to drop in the chat just a values word list to get you started, to kind of break open your mind a little bit so you can even know what you're choosing from. This list is by Brene Brown. I love her. She's like a psychologist rock star. And it's just a list, a reams and reams of list of singular words that are values, okay? So pair these two worksheets together in some stillness, in a reflective time, hopefully in some solitude. It's a lost art. And try to walk yourself through this, right? Okay. Now, secondly, as a psychologist, I know the power of open-ended exploratory questions, right? That can usually uproot more than we bargained for, but that's what we're looking for right now. And I have a few questions for you to consider. So if you're a note taker, jot these down because they might take a little time to bake out for you to answer. These questions will help you discover your values, okay? The first question is, and I think it's my favorite. The first question is, when do I feel most alive? Isn't that a nice one? At the end of your day, for a couple days in a row, maybe even a week or two, check in with yourself, right? What part of my day did I lose myself in? Did I lose track of time? Was it when I was talking to a certain person about a certain idea? Was it when I was dancing? That's mine. Was it when I was creating something? When did I feel most alive? Or when did I lose track in my day? There's something in that behavior or engagement that's worth kind of pulling the thread to see what it leads you to. These are your beacons to follow, right? And there's a few other different questions, a little more difficult. What do I want? I think as professional students, you're very keen at planning for the future, doing what's required, doing what others want of you. But it can be a radical act, even a resistance type of act, to ask, what do I want? If I was the only person I was considering, what would I want? A follow-up question is, why do I want what I want, right? That's kind of getting into a deeper level of sentiment. And then my systems question is, who benefits from me wanting this? Why do I ask that question? Why do I field that your way? That question almost becomes your own internal checks and balances, because remember, we're all influenced by these other systems, right? And sometimes we've been taught to want something that might not actually be good for us, right? I'll give you a de-identified conversation I had with a student who was applying for a co-term. Here at Stanford, you can finish your undergrad and then do a co-term and then go do other things. And she was like, yeah, I'm applying for this. I got in and I might defer. And I've known this client for a while. And I said, it doesn't seem like you're very jazzed about this. You know, what else is here? And she said, I don't even know if I want to do the co-term, right? And I was like, why did you think you wanted it? And all these other messages and pressures from outside started showing up. Well, my parents want this. It's another year at Stanford. I had another client who was graduating and desperately wanted a Tesla. There's dime a dozen Teslas out here in the Bay Area. And I was like, why do you want that? And she said, it's because of how people will receive her when they see her in it, right? So that's that condition of worth of status and value and external value, right? So what do I want? Why do I want what I want? And who benefits from me wanting this? Sometimes the person or entity or structure benefiting from this can be exploitive, can be steeped in one of these systems of oppression. So just ask yourself these questions, right? And see what comes up, right? All right, here's 2 last ones. And I know there's some parents in the room from our word cloud. So if those are harder to grasp, these 2 strike right to the core. What would I, for future parents, or what do I want to instill in my kids? Yeah, what do I want to instill in my children? That gets to it real quick, right? When I'm thinking about bringing up another human being, what's most important? That really helps us clarify it quite quickly, right? I have a 3-year-old, don't say 2, she just turned 3, she'll let you know. I have a 3-year-old now, and the things that matter most to me for her is to be engaged, to be kind, which includes herself, right? To be aware, to be conscious of what's happening, right? And so it's not surprising to me that those that I want for her are almost a mirror image to what some of my own values are, right? So what would I or do I want to instill in my kids? And then here's one more. Forgive me, it's a little morbid. I don't think so. I think it's a lovely question to be asking even when you're young. It is, what do I want others to remember most about me? Doesn't mean death. It could be moving away or something else, or end of a relationship, or an end of an era like graduation. But what do I want others to remember most, right? What do I want them to linger in their mind about my character, or how I made them feel, or impact was the first value that I saw show up on our word cloud. So those are the questions. Let me go ahead and drop them in the chat. Just so we can have them all in one place. When you answer these questions, words like on Brene Brown's value list will start to come up. You'll start to identify and articulate, bring some contour and shape to this amorphous idea of values. Then the charge becomes, that's only step 1, a little bit more here before we open it up for Q&A. Then the charge becomes, how do I manifest these values? How do I embody these desires, these wants of mine in my daily life? Now, when I was a grad student and someone said daily, I was like, miss me with that. I don't have time for something daily. So let's go to weekly. How do I manifest these words and what they mean weekly, at least in my life, right? So that means, let's say we said impact or creativity or time with family. That means creating that routine, that habit, where there's pit stops with family, where you have time to create, or you use, I love a good double dip. You use the project or the thing you're working on to feed some of these other values, but we have to know what they are in order to orchestrate a double dip of work I have to get done and work I want to get done. Hear me, if your day is all have tos and no get tos, your wellness is going to get off skew very quick. And then that manifests in a whole bunch of rebellious and depressive behaviors, right? So we're looking for this integration of what are my values and how do I get to embody them every day? So I think now is a good time for me to touch upon 2 of the questions I saw that came in even before we got started today. And then I'll open it up larger for other questions. I think I'm doing well on time, Christy. So the first question was, let me make this a little bigger. How can I find out what my values are? I believe we answered that. Doing this values exploration and asking yourself these open-ended questions and giving yourself time. Look at past behaviors, even talk to close loved ones that have the jurisdiction to give you that feedback, but also just take some time with yourself, okay? Look at someone you admire, do that excavation. Question number 2, how can we best advocate for and stay true to our established values when navigating the workplace or a job search? All right, I have a tip on this one. So before you start interviewing, okay, I have about 5 minutes. I'll answer this one and then I'll open it up. Before you even start interviewing, write down some of your ideals and some of your non-negotiables. This idea of non-negotiables, I want everyone in this room to get really familiar with. You have power, you have agency, and it's your job to fashion a life that you want to live, right? So before you interview, jot down some ideals that would be bells and whistles, heated seats, and then some non-negotiables. And then after you interview, then see which jobs and which positions actually answer those, at least the non-negotiables. Why we do this before we interview is because we can get convinced after the fact. Bells and whistles, exploding offers, other influences. So that is a contract with yourself about what you pre-decided that you were or were not going to agree to. So that's one important tip. Okay. Now go ahead and write in the chat if we have other questions. And I will read one more that's already here as I wait for new ones. Okay, here's one. How does joy in one's work relate to work-life balance? How do we distinguish between work-life balance versus a need to reorient our work or redirect our career? Good one, good one. So for this, I'm feeling, how does joy? Okay. Joy is actually my favorite emotion. I'm glad it's coming up in our time today. Joy is different from happiness. It's a little more sustainable, and it's something you create on the inside versus happiness literature tells us it's more external. This situation makes me happy, food makes me happy, blah, blah, blah. So how does joy relate to work-life balance? Well, a couple of things I could say here. One, not all of us have the luxury of working in an area that we enjoy, right? There's probably elements of our work that we don't enjoy. My Jamaican grandma says, no matter where you go, half a foot did it, meaning there's always something, that we don't like about a job. But joy can be two things. Joy can be interwoven into the work. Maybe you select projects or do elements of things that touch on your joy. But the other truth is, we might need to embrace, based on the circumstance, that we might not get joy from our work, right? That we might have to seek joy outside of our work. And that's okay too, right? And so as long as joy is present in your life, and if you're doing a little bit more integration and it's not all work and no play, then you're going to be touching that joy more frequently, okay? I do want to wrap it there. How do you find accomplishment? Ooh, let me get this one in. How do you find accomplishment while navigating towards a career that might offer a better work-life balance? Okay, I believe that accomplishment needs to be self-defined, right? Yes, we have all these external mile markers, graduation, candidacy, quals, things like that. And inside of those, identify things that you want to hit. Smaller mile markers that mean something to you. That way, if the outside structure gets off timeline, that was my worst nightmare and it happened, gets off timeline or goes wonky, you still have an internal structure of validation and achievement that you're more in charge of. More on that, but hopefully that's something to get us a spark to think about. All right, I always like to save a little time at the end to just say, thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you for your grit and your perseverance. I hope each of us have a nourishing and replenishing break up ahead, and that we can slowly learn how to activate and actualize some of these things I shared with you today.